Welcome. This is the History Makers, the show that brings you top personalities, people who will give you the biggest conversations. And today, I'm privileged to host one and only Wambui Collymore. What is in the name? You will find out. Welcome, Wambui.
Thank you very much.
Now, tell me about this jazz festival, the Bob Collymore Jazz Festival. I think it's new, it's fresh, it's the first time.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. And it's an opportunity to showcase great jazz talent. A lot of it has been growing over the last, I'd say, 9 years or so. And it falls upon the background of a history of jazz from the 1960s in Kenya.
So why did you decide to coincide it with the birthday or the day our good friend and your husband passed on? So
some things happen by coincidence, but sometimes they also happen because that's how the universe intends it. We've been wanting to do a jazz festival for a while, and the date that we could actually get was the 1st of July. We thought, well, why not? What better way to celebrate Bob than to have an opportunity to gather around good music and community.
So is it yearly? Is it only one-off?
So the BC International Jazz Festival will be in February, starting next year.
Next year?
Yeah. This year we've done it in July to commemorate Bob Collymore and his legacy. But then from next year we will be having it in February.
The choice of artists. Who picked? Is it you or is it Koi?
Is it Koi? Luckily for me, I have a great team of women working on this particular project. We have Kavuda Mwanzia, who is the music director. Many people know her as Teacher Kavuda. And then I also have Zahida Suleiman, who is the events director. And I have Koi, who is leading our communications and PR. And it was actually Kavuda's choice. Kavuda was the festival director of the jazz festivals that Bob used to run. So I have great faith in who she ends up choosing. And some of the musicians have come through the stage of the festivals that Bob did in the past. And so it would be nice to close the loop and have them appear again at this inaugural festival.
So, sort of a mini reunion now. Again.
It's sort of a mini reunion and also a good opportunity to show people that it has survived. Even if in the last maybe 4 years or so there hasn't been much around jazz on a large scale, it has survived. And there are clubs that have come up over the last number of years that specifically cater to jazz and to the jazz crowd.
I thought you are a lover of art.
Yes.
Now I'm finding the different side of you. I've always known that you are into art and that space.
Art and music are tied. You know?
But they're different formats.
They're different formats, but they're all expression of creativity. And I think of creativity as the human ability to bring forth to life something that is, I'd say, inspired by an other. So creativity is God-given. And so music and art are just ways of expressing that. It's a way of expressing beauty. It's a way of expressing humanity. So they're not very different.
But anyway, but if you look at the...
Anyway.
I'll come back to your art bit. But if this jazz festival, it's a yearly project, or will you change artists? Will you have international artists joining in the future?
Starting in February, we will have international artists come and join us. So we're working with the diplomatic community here to create partnerships that will bring artists from countries like Germany, Belgium, Italy, the US. And that's what gives us the international component. That's what we're called the BC International Jazz Festival. It is an opportunity for our musicians to learn and for them to also teach those other musicians that are coming in. And one of our partners is actually Ghetto Classics. So Ghetto Classics is a program that runs in Korogosho and Mukurukwa Ruben, Mombasa and Kisumu. And it affords over 300 children the opportunity to learn music and express themselves through music. Children who are from working class families. And many of our artists, we hope, will also work with Ghetto Classics in a practical way, whether it's in teaching or providing opportunities and learning for music. But for each series, we will decide who will be a beneficiary. It will be usually somebody who has to do with music.
So Ghetto Classics was one of the projects Bob really championed.
Yes.
Has it been faring on, you know, when the vision holder goes, sometimes the vision disappears midway. How is this being kept together?
Ghetto Classics is actually run by a woman called Elizabeth Jaroge.
Yes.
She is the founder, and she's actually the vision keeper of Ghetto Classics itself.
Yes.
She does an amazing job with the work that she has done over the last, I think, 15 years now. And I think where Bob came in with Ghetto Classics was introducing some international artists, some large international artists to the community.
Yes.
So Kirk Whalum, Jimek, musicians who have remained in touch with Ghetto Classics. Some of them have provided musical instruments, and a number of them continue to do master classes. So you can imagine you're a kid from Korogosho,
yes.
but you're learning from Kirk Whalum, who is a Grammy Award-winning jazz musician.
Artist, yeah.
So we've had conversations with some of those musicians who appeared in the jazz festivals when Bob was running them, and a number of them want to come back. And what they say is that there is impact in the work that they do here. There is a welcoming community, and the fact that we have such a large jazz audience is not a small issue, because most international jazz audiences don't even pull the crowds that we have been able to in the last number of years. So Kenya is receptive. We're hungry for good stuff.
But most of them don't understand jazz.
Yes.
It's just fun, it's just something fresh for them.
You know, it's interesting that you can say that most of them don't understand jazz. Understanding jazz is, I find, is more about how it makes you feel.
Okay.
And I think jazz being an expression of the human condition, it's difficult not to understand it if you are human. There are some ways in which a piece will draw you to a memory that you might have had of a loved one, or it will draw you to a happy moment. And that's what jazz does. So I think when we say most Kenyans don't understand jazz music, yes, in terms of like, these are the standards and this is what we're doing, but in terms of the conversation about being human, Kenyans do. And we love it. And we want to be somewhere where we want to be out in the sun with friends, having a good time. You know, not necessarily having to think about what else is happening around us, but for a moment in time, we're present. Good music, good company.
Good vibes.
Good vibes. Yeah, good vibes.
I'll take a bit back to when you said about the vision carrier of Ghetto Classics. Bob was very passionate about jazz.
Yes.
It was his thing. And he made sure that for the many years in Nairobi, personally, I attend most of the jazz festivals abroad. And I could see it was almost rivaling the Cape Town Jazz International Jazz Festival, which they do 50 artists, 10 stages, concurrently 3 days. If your vision for this one, would you think that we'll reach to that level where our jazz is grown to have multi-stage concert, where we have 2 or 3 artists performing in different venues but in one vicinity?
I don't see why not. I don't see why I cannot have that function. But I think what we're also thinking about is multi-city. So you don't just have it in Nairobi, but you also have it in Kampala. One of the things that I dream about is that in 5 years' time, this jazz festival has got like a year-long roster. So you can, in January, you can start in Morocco. February, you can go to Cape Town. And just examples of ways in which we can collaborate so that it's not just based in Nairobi. It allows us to travel across the continent as well.
Are you trying to do linkages with other jazz festivals?
Oh, yes, definitely. We will look for relationships with other jazz festivals, jazz partners. We want to get onto the map and the roster of what is the jazz world.
So if I'll take you back to your other love, of course, art.
Yes.
How do they connect? art space jazz. Wambui.
Yes. Like I mentioned, I think jazz and music are, art and music are firmly related.
Yes.
And for me, I do not create artwork in silence. I create artwork with music.
Okay.
And often that music it could be jazz or jazz-based. I particularly like African jazz musicians, Salif Keita, Fatoumata Diawara being one. And I don't see a division between the two. So it's not too much of a leap for me as an artist to envision my surrounding to be that of music. So they're not unrelated.
They're not far apart.
Yeah.
Your last exhibition was very interesting.
Yes.
What was the inspiration? Or the Venus one?
Okay. My last exhibition was called All My Venus Days.
Yes.
And All My Venus Days
Yes.
was about the processing of grief. The work began in 2018, and it was related to the immigrant crisis and how, as humans, we're now consuming grief on our mobile phones. So you read a story, for example, about the little boy who washed up on the shores, Turkish little boy who washed up on the, I think it was Greek shores, Ayan, and you have a choice. You could either forward it or archive it,
Yes.
delete it, but nonetheless you consume it. And I was exploring ways in which, as humans, we have started to look at grief as normal as breathing, without really understanding its place in how it helps us understand the world, and again, about being human. So that work developed from 2018 and then became central to my expression of my grief when my late husband passed on. And so All My Venus Days was a documentation of the process of grief in a very personal way. And it was a discussion of what it is to lose someone who is very important to you, and ways in which we try to remember or memorialize that person. So for me, art is an expression, and a way in which I talk about how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking, or a way in which I look at the world. And so it was that excavation of those thoughts and expressions and feelings.
What caught my eye was the veil, the curtains, the way
Yes.
they were put, and behind the curtains were the piece of art where you had the clothes, the shirts, the way they were arranged, they were very neatly done. It looked like a photo, but it was actually an art of a work of art.
Yeah.
How did you come with that concept to do all that, and what expressionally, what was the curtain representing?
All My Venus Days was inspired by the work of another artist who, through their process, they document time. So the art pieces, which were works that were photographs of Bob's belongings, were a time. So it was a capture of a space in which I knew that eventually it will change, because you have to pack up those things, you have to empty those shelves. So I captured that moment, what it was to be in a space where he had just been. And many of the other art pieces in that space were captures of moments. And the reason it was called All My Venus Days is because Venus has got a large number of days in comparison to Earth. I think it's double or triple the number of days it takes for a revolution.
Yeah.
And it feels like that with grief sometimes. It's a day, but then it feels stretched. But within that stretching, there is captures of memories and in time. So that's what that work was.
Very creative.
Thank you.
I couldn't get that bit. I was
Yes.
wondering, why is this blocking?
Yes.
Why is it so?
Why is there a veil?
Yeah,
It's
why is
also a veil because when you're going through grief, in some ways you are in your own world.
Yes.
You can see the world, and the world can
Can't-
look in on you,
yeah.
but they can't really see you.
Yes.
And you can't really see the world
What?
in the same way that you
It
once
was,
did.
yes.
So it's veiled. It's like a veil is between yourself and the reality that you're in.
I like the bit where you connected the kids and you connected your personal grief into the art. What would you say was the outcome? Do you feel that people understood your art concept, and did it help many people? Did it help you as well?
I think All My Venus Days provided a cathartic space for a number of people who had lost ones that they loved.
Yes.
I invited the audience to participate by bringing items of which they were grieving. So it could be a picture, or
Yes.
it could be lost opportunity. I mean, we just went through Corona, and a lot of people have lost opportunities.
Yes, yeah.
You've lost your job, you've lost your identities, have lost their families. And so I asked people to bring items that reminded them, or items that they wanted to remember. And a lot of people brought photographs of loved ones. Some people wrote letters. And together we pinned them onto a curtain that then allowed us to all look at the grief and to reflect upon the grief. So it was a space of honoring the love that we had, because that's what grief is. Grief is love with nowhere to go.
So I like the exhibition. It's actually, now I understand it better.
Yes.
I was really struggling with a few issues there to understand, but you've explained it. But if you look at the way you arrange those T-shirts, are still the same in the Bob's wardrobe, the same way you've kept them, or you've moved them?
So the shirts that I had there
Yeah.
are art pieces.
Okay.
So those shirts have got poetry on them that I was able to write.
They're written.
Embroidered poetry.
Yes.
And they are symbolic of wifely duties, because women traditionally are supposed to be the ones who sew the buttons and do all of that. So it was I guess a tribute to that aspect of wifely duties. But at the same time, I was able to incorporate what was my first love, which is actually poetry.
Yes.
To something that reminded me of somebody that I loved. So because they're art pieces, they remain with all the other items in that space, and should the opportunity arise again to do that particular work, another iteration of that work, then I will be able to use those pieces.
So what were the inscriptions on the poetry you had on those shirts?
So the embroidery that was on the white shirts was poetry I had written over, I'd say, since Bob found out that he had cancer until the time that he passed away, because I realized that it was easier to express myself with words than it was to create artwork. So that's what those are. Those words are about my thoughts again, my feelings in that particular time.
So you have captured them for the moment, but also for future.
Yes, of course.
So you can reflect, you can see what at that time on space, because we say that time is at space, and at that time you can create and see what actually transpired by then. It's also looking back.
It is.
Yeah.
It also allows for healing, because you then have placed your time and thoughts and you have removed or excavated,
Yes.
which then allows you to have space to have new thoughts or new feelings.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But I hope you healed. It's a long journey though.
I don't think you can say, I hope you've healed for grief. Grief is lifelong.
It's lifelong.
Grief is lifelong. Yeah. Which is what I'm coming to understand. And I think anybody who's lost somebody that they love also understands that you learn to live with it. You grow a muscle so that the grief remains the same, but you have grown around it.
You better understand it.
You better understand it. You're easier on yourself. You're less expected that you will get over it. There's no such thing as getting over grief.
So what do you remember mostly about your late husband? Me, if you ask me, I know what I remember.
Yeah, tell me
about
what you remember about him.
He was a loving guy.
Yes, he was.
Fantastic guy.
Exactly.
With people.
What else?
Many things.
Yes.
Yes.
One of them being that he was very funny as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah,
It would say
generous.
it's like a joke and you laugh.
Kabisa. And I think you mentioned to me earlier that you went to university with him.
Yes.
And
Then I had a t-shirt written behind here, CEO. So he turned me in the crowd. So when he was called,
Yeah.
he pushed me and said, no, the CEO is this one.
Yes.
And then he turned. So we had very moments. Then the other
Yeah.
time is when Koi wrote a letter that Standard Group had wronged him, and they insisted I had to go, and I was not part of the team.
Yeah.
It was that you have to come, you have to come. If
Yes.
you're coming, yes. So Koi had to call me.
Yes.
That Bob has said you come.
Yes.
I said, oh my goodness. It was an interesting guy.
Yeah, he was an interesting guy, and I think what I have enjoyed in the last number of years is when people remember him.
Yes.
If they're talking to me,
Yes.
they have wonderful stories like what you have just told me.
Yes.
And it's the gift that keeps giving. To meet people who knew him in some capacity or had met him,
Yes.
and they have an interesting story about him.
He was a great guy.
He really was. Yeah.
So before you did all that Venus, there was another exhibition you had, which was about, is it colonialism? There was another one. You've had very many.
So I've had several exhibitions.
Yes.
And some of them are about decoloniality,
Yes.
which I describe as the process in which, as Africans, we are defining ourselves,
Yes.
not in relation to colonialism. Because unfortunately, what happens is when we talk about African history, we refer to colonialism. But Africa existed before colonialism.
Yes.
And now it exists long after colonialism. And it's been 60 years since we've had independence. But who are we to ourselves? Who are we as Africans on the continent in reference to the rest of the world? So I have done work around that. I've also done work around womanhood, expressions of womanhood. And currently I am, in the next year, 2024, I will be looking at items that are in museums that are either marked for restitution, which is bringing them back, but items that have been taken from us as Africans during the colonial process. So here I'm referring to tools that have got language or inherent knowledge that is lost simply by the fact that it sits in a museum box. I'm very interested in history because my background is in history. And I'm also very interested in how people remember things. So even all my Venus days is all about memory as well.
What is your English name?
Interestingly,
Yes.
I don't have an English name.
No, Wambui. The one you, confirmation.
Because they're actually Hebrew names. And what my mother did was request that I do not be given a Hebrew name. Hebrew, English, it's relatively the same thing.
Yes.
So, no, I do not actually